Welcome to Selling Circular, the podcast dedicated to exploring the innovative minds and business models shaping our transition to a circular economy. I'm Garr, CEO of Loop Layer.
I'm Sabira, Lakhani, VP of Product at SpareTech. Today we're diving deep into a transformative story in the world of fashion circularity. Our guest, Nicole Bassett, who we're treating as a selling circular royalty. She's been pushing circular economy solutions since like the early 2000s, long before terms like ESG or circular economy were part of the mainstream vocabulary.
I used the royalty term. You'll hear that coming up. I was fanboying a little bit. You know, I respect her work. We got introduced to her, we being you and I, were now no longer at Reaply. Right around when you would have joined Reaply in about 2019, 2020 is when we would have actually first met her at an MIT Solve event.
Yes. And she was part of the cohort.
Yeah, she was. And so I've known her throughout the years. And so this was finally a great opportunity to talk about what she's been doing and where she came from. Because really, I love her career because she spent formative years at some sustainability royalty. We're talking Patagonia, we're talking Prana, learning how to embed sustainability into their business operations rather than treating it like a separate entity. And so that's kind of a pivotal moment in any company's sort of sustainability journey where they go, oh, this isn't just a department. This actually needs to be rooted in the operational model. And that really sparked the vision for what would become a really influential company in the space of sustainable fashion that you maybe actually have never heard of. And so this is an opportunity for us to introduce you to Nicole and this wonderful company that she made.
So over the past decade, we've witnessed transformation in fashion re-commerce in general, but that started as a niche movement early on, and now it's evolved into a multi-billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
Of course, accelerated dramatically by COVID and supply chain disruptions, as we started to see the fragility of our linear business models. And so we saw a handful of pioneering platforms in the early 2010s. Then we saw a new wave of new entrants by like 2021-ish, and then another wave in 2023. Most significantly, major fashion brands themselves had entered into this space with the OGs like Patagonia, and then North Face launching their own branded resale program. But that came from some of Nicole's work.
Which we kind of buried the headline here, which is this is all central in terms of an industry transformation to a couple of those key early players. And this player that we're going to talk about is the Renewal Workshop, which Nicole founded in 2014. So here's how it works. Imagine a fashion brand receives thousands of returned items, and previously they kind of didn't know what to do with it. Sometimes it would go towards these resellers that might be a TJ Maxx, or it could be sort of these maybe off-the-shelf types of solutions that would take your inventory, discount it, and provide it towards another demographic. But traditionally, also, these sometimes would end up in landfills if brands didn't want to discount their merchandise. So the Renewal Workshop really created an entirely new solution by building specialized facilities that were really built to receive these items, expertly cleaned and repair them, and then sell them back in like-new condition through the branded online channels to maintain the original brand's quality standards.
And now that this is kind of like status quo, table stakes in the world of re-commerce, but the Renewal Workshop had to innovate and develop sorting technologies, repair processes, e-commerce platforms, specifically for repairing and marketing premium pre-loved products. And so they trained teams combining traditional textile repair skills with modern logistics and technology to breathe life into the fashion re-commerce.
And I think that's where this comes down to, can you prove that circularity can be profitable? And so the Renewal Workshop became the behind the scenes engine powering branded resale for multiple major brands, sort of processing everything from outdoor gear to everyday apparel. And so in 2022, having essentially created an amount of success that captured the attention of another larger company, they were acquired by Bleckmann, a major European logistics company representing one of the first major exits in circular fashion and signaling the industry's maturation from startup innovation to industrial scale operations.
Let's dive in with Nicole Bassett.
It's not often we get to have a guest who is really been a part of selling circular economy solutions since some later, even later aughts into the tens. This is it's almost, I'm treating you essentially like selling circular royalty here, where it's like you've been trying to push some of these solutions in the market for a long time. Automatically, what can you pull us back into the sort of those early days of figuring out those models, what that was like, what those conversations were starting to essentially be had? I would love that, and then we can talk about the evolution.
Well, it's true. I have been doing this a long time before either of you were born, in early
No.
2000s. Yes, but back then, so I did a master's in environmental studies and business in 2004, and it didn't even exist. Like, it wasn't a thing you could get. I went to the environmental studies school, and they were like, we're an interdisciplinary program. Take classes wherever you want. So half my classes are environmental studies and half my classes are in business. And like, there's a group of us and we made up this program. And now what's amazing is like, you can go to any university and get a degree in sustainable business and circularity. So that's one thing that's changed. But back then it was very much about like the hands with the dirt and the leaf growing out of it, and people, planet, profit, and please print on both sides of the paper.
Yes.
So I think that's one thing, like nowadays we take for granted how much actually has changed over time, but it really was selling the concept of like the environment and humans belong in the room when you're making business decisions. And like, that was brand new. Like, it was mostly from a risk mitigation, like oil and gas companies are like, yeah, we have to like remember the people who are here when we're doing our extractive work. But like, as far as regular companies, there were the handful that you would know. It's Ben and Jerry's, it was The Body Shop, it was Patagonia, who were really leading the charge back in those days. So yeah, and then so it's evolved immensely over time to be able to be more mainstream and to be, like if we're anti-ESG, it means people know what ESG is. So I think that that's what's pretty incredible to see, that a lot of progress has been made since then.
I actually didn't even think of that if you can be anti something, that's actually a huge progress point of like, oh yeah, there's enough people to not want to be involved in something. That means we've gotten some sort of critical mass. Then in that time frame of joining Patagonia, I would love to hear about those early years. Those most impressionable moments in a young career, because I know we have a little bit of an audience that is either in their early years or in their mid journey where they are seeking that inspiration. What was that like in those early years where you were sort of evolving into those models? And then we can kind of get into Renewal Workshop and the evolution of really selling that solution.
Yes, I mean, Patagonia is a very special place, and for good and for bad. I mean, I think the fact that it's so values based and the founders really designed the company this way. So when I got there, the environment had been very front of mind for everything. And I actually did an internship both in the environmental team and just starting human rights and social responsibility in the company. And so for me, what was really interesting is like selling the environmental company about like, hey, there's people here too. And there's not just people at the factories, there's people in the cotton fields. And like, when we worry about like the chemicals that are out in different parts of either on the cotton fields or in dye houses or wherever, like it's affecting humans. And how do we take accountability and responsibility for that? So I got the chance to be in a very forward-thinking company that said, we are here to do the right thing, and then also sell a new idea inside the company. And so what was really interesting about Patagonia was that there was back then it was very siloed. So the environmental team worked over here. The social responsibility I was by myself. And then the rest of the business was doing the business. And so like, it still was selling in these ideas that were like, oh, well, this is us doing business differently, even into a group of people that were very much already there. So what was really interesting is after I left Patagonia, I went to Prana. And what I realized, sort of like the good and the bad of Patagonia, is that Patagonia is such a unique entity that if we're going to scale change, like we don't have thousands of Yvonne Schnards, we have regular businesses. And so how do we actually scale change inside of companies that are not necessarily designed around values-based? And so the lesson I had learned from Patagonia was it has to be everyone's job. And so I went up to Prana and I said to the CEO, I will not ask for more resources, but we have to make this everybody's job. And if we do that, then we will scale faster. And he was on board and we did. Like what was amazing is we got done 100 times more than I could ever do on my own, because I would just run slightly ahead of the the product development team and be like, okay, you guys have to worry about these materials and this is the priority and these are the factors you're gonna do. And like, then the whole company was just like adopting and moving in a faster way. And so that was probably my biggest lesson of like, how do you just get the information to the teams in a way that they can use it and also really understand the challenges that they face in their day-to-day work, so that you're not bringing to them stuff that they just can't accomplish.
How did you, I mean, that's really cool that you were able to do that with the CEO and get that like top-down support. And I'm sure it's like a mind shift across the organization, especially at that time, to be like, oh, wait, this is part of my job. So you're saying like you shared information, you probably like did research ahead of time and like empowered people to make it part of their job. But was there any like kind of global messaging or tools like OKRs or anything that helped make it feel like it was part of everybody's job?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So I think when I first got there, I just went around to the low-hanging fruit. I was like, what's the one problem that everyone is annoyed with? And we just happened to pick polybags because ironically, Prana had just maybe 2 years prior started putting their product in polybags because they were at a size that was scaling. And so everyone knew that there was a life before polybags. And so we used that project, and we were smaller then. There was a much smaller team. And so we could get everyone in the room very easily and be like, okay, let's all solve this problem. So we did that. I
love that there's like an institutional memory of pre-polybag.
Right.
That's so interesting. I just never, because that's so probably foreign to now so many companies to be like, oh, how is it even possible?
Totally.
Yeah.
But as the company grew, my CEO, like he actually went to a retreat where there were all these other, like, I don't remember his name, the Whole Foods founder, and then Eileen Fisher. And there was like a whole bunch of like these very visionary environmental CEOs there. And he came back and he was like, let's go to the next level. Like he was super jazzed. So we set a strategy in place and we very much were like, now we have goals and we have metrics and we want to accomplish all of those things. So that helped then each team say, okay, my goal fits into the materials or strategy or the like responsible sourcing strategy or whatever it was.
So we're starting to approach the aha moment where in your career you sort of start thinking there's a real problem, probably what you're seeing. There needs to be some sort of solution. How did that start to become clearer? How did the vision start to really sort of take shape?
Yeah, I think this is also back to your first question of like how things have changed. Like when I mean, this is like 10 years of my career. I'm focused on like, okay, let's like change out this material. Like there's a lot of swapping in sustainability. Here's the bad thing, replace it with the good thing. And it was very tunnel vision. Like I was very focused on like what we have right in front of us and we can do. And then I remember walking into this factory that was massive. Like I wasn't supposed to be there. Like I was on a sourcing trip and there was with other people and they were like, so it was one of the big box retailer factories. So you can't see the other side of the factory. And it's these pink t-shirts, thousands of them getting made. And I kept being like, who is going to buy all of these? And in next season, there's going to be this many pink t-shirts again. And that's when it really dawned on me, like, we should keep doing this. I'm not disregarding the sustainability work, but like the problem is actually the business model itself, which is, circularity. I had been introduced a little bit to circularity. It was right around when the Ellen MacArthur Foundation was growing. I took like environmental economics in school. So I had this like idea about like, how do you integrate our economy into the planet? And so that was the moment. And it was at the time that the Sustainable Apparel Coalitions wasn't the Higg Index then, but the index was looking at it in end of use. So it was the first time like the industry, and then everyone was like, we never thought about what we Like I know it's crazy to say these things now, but that is not how it was back then. And
Well, I
then I
love that
was
that's
like, oh, go ahead.
no, I just love that it's part of the conversation. Again, it's this almost hearing industrially. It's still someone's going out ahead and saying, "Hey, we need to think about end of use," and then everyone else is going, "Oh my gosh, that's the next step," and then reacting and then sharing and then sort of inspiring each other. And so I love that there's that parallel to you at Prana to the industry in general that's reacting and saying, "Oh, this is upcoming. We need to be figuring this out now."
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And it's embarrassing, but I hope everyone feels comfortable with this, that you're like, I'm the expert in this field and I should know this stuff. And then you learn about it and you're like, I never thought of it that way. I never thought of it that way. But once you think of it that way, you can't unsee it. And I think that's the part when I got really into circularity, I was like, oh, we can't unsee this stuff. Like literally, if we keep business as usual and revenue growth is tied to production growth, well, like it just won't work. We will eventually, I don't know if it's in my lifetime, we will run out of stuff on our planet, or we will pollute ourselves, or we will bury ourselves in garbage. So then it's like, oh, there's an evolution occurring here. So I was like, okay, what if the apparel industry could be a circular business model? What would that look like? And having been in production and sourcing and supply chain, I knew that the benefit would be is if you built a supplier that served multiple brands versus one brand building their own factory, then you would be able to deal with all the problems that you deal with when you have unbalanced production and payroll and employment and all those sorts of things. So I like wrote a business plan for the Renewal Workshop, and then I called my buddy Jeff Denby and I was like, how do you start a company?
Classic.
Like,
Great.
follow me, kiddo. And so together we got initial funding and we got the Renewal Workshop off the ground as really to be the solution so that the brands could just literally like go to the shelf and buy it and like plug it into their business model. And now we have a circular business economy. We don't. And there's lots of reasons why, but
That was going to be, I was like, please tell me more. What am I missing? Yeah.
no. We learned a lot, and the industry has learned a lot, and things are very different now. And it's unearthing, just like the sustainability journey unearthed things. This is unearthing things that we still need to work on behind the scenes to sort of like keep moving the machine towards circular.
That seems like sorry, Sarah.
No, go for it.
Well, what are those things? I mean, off the top of your head, what have we learned? Yeah. Like, what do we need to do?
I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that there are a lot of different stakeholders, and circularity is a system. It really requires a different mindset and a way of thinking instead of this swapping out. Like, I'm going to use a blue sign fabric instead of a conventional fabric or whatever. So this is like, I generate revenue from resale? Like, what does that actually mean? And why would I want to, as everyone calls it, cannibalize your first sale? You're like, well, no, you actually do want to cannibalize your first sale. That would be success. And you have to also think about going upstream and designing product differently so that you can get efficiencies inside of the circular business model. And then you do need technologies to exist that don't exist right now. I mean, there's some coming online around recycling, but it's sort of like you're moving a lot of pieces always, and there's different experts in it. And so I think we were part of the problem. We came in and just sold the solution like it was super easy. And what we learned is we sold a piece of that solution super easy. And Blackman continues to do the work that we did in the Renewal Workshop. But now when we're like, oh, but you have to change this and this and this, there's a lot of like, that's a lot. And my business is not ready to change all those things.
Yeah, I think, what you're saying resonates with me a lot. And I guess I'm curious, you're saying like you sold something that felt easy, like at a time when maybe this like concept of e-commerce or even like maximizing the utility of a thing and all of that was new. So how did you get like those first customers to buy in? Like, what do you think made it so that you at least had like some initial adoption, even though like the next phase of success would be like getting more people or more parts of the systems to play along? But like, what was that magic?
Oh, that's a great question. And it was hard. So, like at the very beginning of this, so this is 2014 when we started talking to brands for the first time. And I remember we went to an outdoor retailer show and we set up these calls, or sorry, not calls, these meetings with various brands. And we sat down with them and we're like, what are you doing with all of your damaged returns? Or what could you be doing with like a trade-in program? Is that interesting to you? We're just trying to get a sense of like where people were at. And some brands were they're like, oh yeah, no, we know exactly where they are. They're in the dumpster. It was like, okay, well, how about that we change dumpster to like a facility and we will take responsibility and we will clean and repair it. The other thing I knew from having been in brand for so long was like, I know you care about the quality standards. So like we said, we're going to do a pilot. We will take some of your stuff. We will clean and repair it and we will send it back to you so you can see what we mean by secondhand and sales. The other thing was a lot of brands were like, we don't resell our clothes. We only sell new things. That's our business. And so this is not interesting to us. So there was like, yeah, those initial conversations, which again, like you look, here we are like almost 11 years later and companies are like, oh yeah, I'll resell my stuff. So like progress has happened for sure. And I think we found like 5 brands who knew Jeff and I well and understood like that we were going to hold their brand in with a lot of love and take care of it and not put something out into the world that didn't feel like on brand. And so when we first started, we launched with 5 companies. And then once we put their resale products into the market, that is when the light bulb went on. And we were able to get way more companies that were interested in doing resale.
For those brands then, and that initial adoption, what were those marks that you all were trying to hit as you were sort of, again, building the ship as you're trying to figure out how to navigate it?
Yeah, I think there was 2 big parts. So one was we were trying to build the market and see if the brands were like, we were very focused on our audience or the brands. And we also realized that we had to bring a customer along in this. And so we were also doing customer facing marketing around it and building awareness around it. So we like did an Indiegogo campaign to just like get people like, let me try the product, just like that kind of stuff to like get out there. And then we did a newsletter.
Grassroots. Yeah, like real. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And because this was very, very new, right? Like, so every other resale that was going on out there was being done by the third party marketplaces. And so, yeah, so we were building the customer, building that. And then it was like building the operations. So there's the like, okay, everything is a one-off. And how do you build tech for that? And how do you build operations for that and process flows for that? All those things that we eventually had to like figure out from the ops side. And then at the same time, yeah, the sales side and get the customers based in that. And then get the brands more interested in it. And it really did. I mean, I think the biggest thing was we launched the North Face's Renewed program and they wanted their own website and they wanted to own the branding. And that was like a big change. And then, to give credit, like they were Yurtle back then, but Trove did Patagonias. And so like when you saw Patagonia and the North Face launch these resale online programs, it really lifted the like, this is like serious now.
There's a case study in here, and this won't lead to a question, Sabira, so please. But there's a case study here too where, I mean, in that era, you also riding like a post Macklemore thrift shop, like rise in people like accepting used and accepting thrifted goods, that somehow that seemed to maybe hit a wave in a really nice way, I think, culturally.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that song.
Yeah, it's great. I think it just changed the common idea of what a thrift shop and thrifting could mean. But there's probably another article in there, Sabira, I need to write about that.
Well, I thought you were going to go in the direction of like, if we're at Harvard, does the Renewal Workshop make way for a new era of re-commerce technologies and like inspire the next generation of founders? Or like maybe, Nicole, hearing from your perspective, like what happened in the market? Like, were you a paver or like a town settler and then like others came in? Do you wish that the Renewal Workshop went in that direction? Like what Where was your head at the time?
Yeah, it was interesting because yes, we were the first and I remember I was like, I want to build a factory and I want to do operations because that's what I knew, right? Like supply chain is my background. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh my God, we have to do tech. And so one of our first hires was a systems person. And so she was like, all right, we need a software to run our production. We're going to need, how are we going to do the sales side of this and all of that. And so for the longest time, it was just the Renewal Workshop and Trove on the branded resale side. And then there, of course, was all the third-party marketplaces. Obviously, eBay's been around forever, and ThreadUp had just come on the market. There's so many tradesy, real. Like, there's so much happening in that space. And so I guess I always felt like we weren't alone in that. And then you are right, in 2021, there was this like other retail tech or resale tech came online, and like maybe a good half a dozen companies. And then like in 2023, another dozen companies. Like it's just been exploding. And I think part of that, if I'm guessing, I'm thinking 2021's boom sort of happened because of COVID and supply chain disruption. At that time, interest rates were very low. So VC was like, oh, if we haven't gotten into it then, we should get into it now. And what I think to be fair is a lot of the tech that came online was addressing this underlying issue, which was touching the product is expensive. So if there's a way that we can do it where we don't have to touch the product, we're peer-to-peer, we can just sell to each other, or we can enable anything faster. Like
the asset light approach.
Yeah. For better or for worse, it pushed competition's good. I remember reading something that says the best thing that can happen is to have a competitor. And we had Trove and we would it was funny because back then it was slow. So we would put out something and then they would put out something and we would put out something and we were pushing each other. And now all this huge amount of competition is great because you're like, oh, okay, what does the market actually need and want? Because people are approaching the problem from different angles. And in some ways, that means more problems are getting solved because people are trying to figure out different stuff. And then I think then there's probably a lot of overlap too.
If I may then, in some other ways, you get a lot of not so solution-oriented companies in terms of, and I'll explain this further, is I see that there's a truth, there's a real solution out there. And I think I rolled my eyes a little bit when you talked about how they don't want necessarily to be operationally in charge of clothing. Because for me, in the solutions that I've seen out there, and what I think is really the future is reclaiming, repairing, and almost revaluing those for consumption. And without that, you're still spiraling down. You're not quite ever going to get something to be back more valuable or back of use. And so I have a hard time with that a little bit.
Sabira, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying that, I was actually wondering, your observation of the pink t-shirts. Unfortunately, even the competition and all the market today, the bloodbath today is still addressing this symptom, right? We are not producing less pink t-shirts that I'm aware of. I think there's some tech today that could help, that I seen that maybe helps you optimize what you stock in store so that you're not overstocking or maybe starting to order less. We might be starting to go on that journey now with the AI tools that will be available to us.
More just in time, manufacturing.
Yeah. But what we're talking about today with the landscape is strictly dealing with the symptom. And yeah, I liked what you were saying, you wanted to build a factory because that is the core of the problem, right? The problem is that we don't have a good way to process from owner one to owner two. That is the major symptom. And then the asset light companies are kind of okay, you do the work of figuring out what should happen next. So yeah, I think we still have a ways to go to reframe the real or focus on the real problem.
Yeah, no, you're right. And I think that's like, I always look at us, we're in it, and it's like we're in a continuum, right? So we'll look in 10 years and be like, oh yeah, we saw where we were now, and this is how we adjusted and got there. But that was one of the biggest learnings that I had when we got acquired by Bleckman. So Bleckman is a logistics company. It's a 3PL for primary customers around fashion or textile based brands. And then is this idea of like, how do you and let technology enable something, but how do you actually just get really efficient in systems? So as a startup, the Renewal Workshop, we had to like solve problems and then demonstrate a market and like show our funders this certain path. But once we were acquired, we were inside of a company that had a business model. And then we're like, okay, now you have to make this business model work. But what they brought in was like in logistics, it's like pennies on the floor. So you're just like, how do you find every little way to increment, like get efficiency? And so bringing that mindset into what we had built opened my eyes up of like, yeah, no, the real problem is we have to find out at every intervention point where we can to address how waste gets created and solve for that immediately. Like Bleckman created this product called Rescue, which is essentially like, why are damaged returns getting sold as resale? Why aren't we fixing a damaged return? Because we have a renewal workshop in the facility now, right? Like, why isn't it getting fixed and repaired and putting back into stock and sold as new? Which I think is how things used to be probably like 40, 50 years ago.
Speaking of institutional memory,
Yeah,
it's like
right?
we're losing that. Yeah.
Right. But then it opened my eyes of like, oh, I'm trying to solve this problem and I need to be thinking more about how do I solve for the system problem.
Yeah, I think, I mean, even just zooming back to like the t-shirt, it's such a like strong image for me because I'm kind of like, even when we're talking about organizational memory, it's kind of like we just got over our skis, right? Like we realized, oh, we can produce a lot of things and like somebody can make so much money making these things. Amazing. Like what a human capability. And then we like go all in on that. And now we're trying to like scramble and can't even rewind to the point where we're like, okay, once upon a time, goods could be repaired and sold as new, right? Like we're so over our skis that like we have lost any like of that. It's like almost like traditional, like old school linear economy goodness, right? Like that's all evaporated.
And then classically too, I mean, Nicole, you made this point of then things were made differently to accommodate at that speed. And so, speaking back to how we need to build this back into circular design, does that mean making things better? Or does that slow things down? Or is it just making things different that can unhook or unzip or do things in ways that are mechanical or easier or somehow get that ready? What's the labor part of all of this? That's very much has to be probably one of the, that if not, has to be the biggest barrier.
The labor piece? Yes.
Of circular economy. Yeah.
Yes and no. Like you definitely, like the yes part is like you need skilled people who know how to repair things and also like skilled people who know how to design and build product. Like, yes. And those people in the US are not as easy to find. Interestingly, our staff was like a mix between like Hispanic women in their 50s and like hipsters and like in their 20s from Portland. Like, and it was this awesome, like sharing, training situation that was happening. I loved watching that. But then there was a lot of parts of it that was pretty, like once we built the systems to train, it was pretty easy to bring in someone who didn't have a ton of like knowledge about textiles on like, this is how you sort, this is why. We built in a lot of like processes that we would capture data through the system. But a lot of our costs really come down to because product and brands are not designed for resale. So if they were designed for resale, right? Digital product passports, designed for disassembly, repairability, you can decrease the amount of cost it is to like get product back into market. So like the other thing I tell people is we are at the most inefficient resale structure ever because we've now all applied linear product, linear businesses to resale. In the future, we will redesign the business so that the products and the business is designed for efficiency and you will see it be profitable, more profitable, because some businesses are making this work, even though it isn't efficient.
Yeah. I love that so much. That there's still friction. We just have to get through that friction a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. The same is like with the AI models, right? Like even the the LLMs that we use today are the worst LLMs that we will ever use. Right? So they'll just keep getting better and better. And so it's the same, right? It's like totally a new way of thinking of like how we'll need to operate AI. Find that parallel so interesting. But I was curious on the acquisition. If you, whatever you can share, like how did it come about? What made you excited about it? How has it gone since you have been acquired? I think it's like a unique story because we haven't seen too many, at least people on the podcast, sharing stories of getting acquired. So I think it would be really cool to hear your point of view.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, now we're entering the generation of circular economy companies that are being acquired. So that's the really interesting part.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, when we first started the Renewal Workshop, eBay had just bought a company called Twice, which was a very similar type business model. It had a marketplace and was doing resale and stuff like that. And we were like, oh my God, this is how it's going to be. We're going to get bought by eBay. The Renewal Workshop started in 2014 and we grew in the US and in Europe. So we opened a factory right at COVID. And we literally trained everyone via Zoom. We had our one director of operations. She was able to come back to the US right before. But that was crazy. And as we were growing the business and looking at like the horizon and like, okay, there's a lot of new entrants. There's a lot of like change that's happening. If we want to keep this idea going, we do find an acquirer that makes sense for us and to take what we've started and sort of take it to the next level. Yeah. And so we actually wrote down a list of like what were all the like criteria if we could have a dream acquirer, what it would be. Whether it's like the manifestation or whatever. Blackman really was that entity. They, like I said, they're a logistics company. They've got warehouses in Europe, Netherlands, Belgium's now Spain, UK, and the US. And they were like, yeah, the way you scale this is you put Renewal Workshops in every single one of our, 40 sites. And that idea was like, oh, that's just going to be just like, that's the path. Like for us to keep raising money, to build facilities and to like that's a lot. And so we have this opportunity. So yeah, so we sold in March of 2022 and I stayed on. There was a group of us that stayed on because there were specific roles that they were really interested in like keeping. And I got to like 6 months and I was like, I really like this. Like, and I really like you guys. And I like that you have this vision of circularity. And it's not, the other thing I love about the Dutch is they're just so practical. So it was not like this, like, there's no sugarcoating anything. It was very blunt and it was very much like, we will grow through circular logistics. And you're like, okay. I like, let's figure that out. And so it was really interesting to make sure to see that like the values and vision of what we started and hold on to that tightly, but really let go of everything else to say, is there a better way to do it? And what we learned was that there was so many better ways to do it. And them bringing their kind of like more industrial mindset to it and us taking our like, yeah, we tried that and here's what we learned and sharing that back and forth and being able to get to where they are today. And so, I actually just transitioned out and in a great way. Like I feel like a parent who's let their kids go to college. You're like, I'm not needed here anymore. You guys got this.
Well, that's like wild because it's been 11 years since you started the Renewal Workshop. So that is like a decade. I'm sure like a significant part of your life. So how do you feel now that you are the parent? I mean, like proud and like looking ahead, what's next, or even looking backwards, like what you might have done differently. Either way, take us in either direction.
It's funny because like I look back with hindsight and I'm like, well, we didn't know this until we got through it. And so in some ways, like I don't know. I look back and I'm like, I'm glad we went through what we went through because we really tried to solve all these problems by getting at like, okay, So like sorting's really hard. We're like, okay, let's get in there and try and figure that out. And then, okay, well, this part's hard. This part isn't hard. And then like, how do you do resale? And like, I mean, sure, I wish Shopify had languages and currencies and other things when we had to like build those things from scratch in 2019. And now that's out of the box. So like,
Yep.
and to your AI point, like this weird tension of like the system is just going to evolve to the answer. Why would I, in hindsight, I guess I'm like, oh, we had to build it so we could show up to the market. But if we had waited 6 months, we could like just followed Shopify on their journey. Right? Anyway, but future state, I think the thing that I'm really interested in now looking at is the next set of structural changes. Like, so 14 years ago, brands didn't have options or solutions. Now you have so many options and solutions in everything from recycling to resale to take back programs to repair. There's like so much out in the market. But the next structural change is really on the business models. And so how do you actually design a circular business for the efficiency and the wins of a circular business? And right now what we have is a whole bunch of linear businesses with like circular type add-ons, but no one is shifting the model. So it looks like this. And I think that's the place I'm really fascinated in and doing a lot of work around. What do finances look like? What does transition look like?
What does the model look like? Is it going to be tight partnerships of different entities? Or is it going to be one size, fits all seems crazy, but like a company that's like, you know what, we've just acquired the parts or we've built the parts. What does that look like?
I think both. There's just stuff where, so here's the thing at the end of the day, what I think my biggest takeaway is the brands have to win. So it is amazing that Depop and Poshmark and ThredUp and all these companies are doing what they're doing because they are utilizing clothes more. We are getting things out of landfill. All of that is great. But if the brands don't have a pathway to staying in business and being profitable inside circularity, then no one wins because none of the solutions have a customer anymore. And so my big thing is, where are the places where brands should pull in outside partnerships and support and resources? And where is it just like, no, you guys already own how to do that internally? And so it'll be a mix of different things. And then in circularity, which is a mindset shift, and it's a new muscle we all have to build, is how do you work in collaboration in ways that we don't know how to work in collaboration now because of either antitrust or competition or whatever. But I foresee our economy will eventually evolve that way because the current economy is not working. And there's lots of fallout you can all see in that. So what would a future economy start to look like? And this is where like donut economics theory and stuff starts to really play into how do we start designing for that? Because I think that, and you hear it, there's little bits of stuff around where people are like, we need to start exploring some of these ideas because our current economy is like, I think like 80% based on consumption. I don't know. You could look at it. And what we're experiencing, like with the tariffs right now, is a lot of, and we experienced with COVID, is like our economy can't handle shocks in the way that it used to. And so how do you start to design it so that we are sort of shock-proofing our economy?
It seems though the leading number is 70%. So very close. Yes.
Insane amount.
That's an insane amount. Yeah. That's an insane amount. It kind of speaks to, and it's one of my favorite parts about doing this podcast is we got to do an episode on degrowth. And degrowth makes me very uncomfortable. And I love addressing how uncomfortable it makes me. But the numbers show, though, that that's one of our most popular episodes. And as many as people come to me and they're like, why are you talking about this? It's, well, because something in it is hitting people in a way where it's like, oh, we might need to rethink consumption to address some of these systemic issues. And so it's one of those, rethinking moments.
Yeah. But I come back to the car industry all the time. Like Toyota has doubled its revenue and it has not doubled the amount of cars it's made. It has been able to decouple in a way it's not perfect. There's all these problems with cars and extraction and stuff like that. But like, that's the kind of like, let's start there and then let's see what we can create. Humans have created what we are in today. I'm sure we could create something better.
As we wrap up our time together here, it sounded like you were hopeful there. Is there anything that like is a bright spot for you or that you're latching on to as you make this transition?
Yeah, I'm really hopeful about what's next because I feel like in the conversations that I have, and I've had the chance to be part of a few workshops lately of people who are looking at things and saying, okay, this isn't working. We've tried a lot. So it means we have to try the stuff that we didn't really want to try. And that's the hard stuff. That's the meaningful collaboration. That's the like addressing business models. That means like we have to like get under the hood a bit more, but there's no more excuses. Like we kind of just like, let's go do the hard work together. And I feel like more people are really interested in that conversation. And there's like a desire for meaningful work. And so I think there'll be you two are obviously there and you're proposing it with all of your conversations is like, how do we move into this hard, meaningful work and excite people around it?
I think not to then, hopefully this doesn't round it out on a bummer, which is I think there's a really interesting moment coming with AI, which is we have a future of really great, meaningful work that's embracing human use, human decisions, and building sort of that economy around that. And this intersection with a very unknown future where we're trying to challenge humans. And so I look to circular economy for that answer. I'm very excited for what we can hopefully build.
I don't know enough about AI, but I think...
Well,
I'm curious to hear. It's curious to hear your take on it. So that's good if you're feeling hopeful.
I'm feeling hopeful, and we can also end on a shoulder shrug. So that's also appropriate. Like, we'll see. Yeah.
Who knows?
Who knows? Yes. We will be looking back and seeing some of the answers develop in the next couple of years. Yeah. Thank you, Nicole.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you guys. And thank you for this conversation.